Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk a little bit about Despicable Me 4, which is actually the sixth Despicable Me movie because there was two Minions movies, and then there's a bunch of shorts. So it's part of the MCU, the Minions cinematic universe, and it's the sixth movie they've made, and yet it's actually pretty decent. And the reason, again, is writing. This fits into the general pattern that I've been noticing for quite some time, which is that the overall quality of writing in Hollywood is low enough that just merely executing the basics in a fairly predictable and formulaic way is still going to produce a decent movie, and in fact, a movie that's better than most of the movies around it. That's the case with Despicable Me 4. When I talk about executing the basics well, it uses an A, B, C story structure, a main plot, a B story, which is a sort of secondary plot that's slightly related, and then a C story that kind of brings everything together. The A story, of course, is the big setup for the movie, and in this case, it is one of Gru's old classmates from like villain high school has decided that he's going to kidnap Gru's new baby. There's even a little bit of a D story, which I'll get to with the Gru baby. But Gru has a new baby with his wife. He's found happiness, but that can't remain for sequels to happen. So we have to disturb that. He's going to try to kidnap the baby. So Gru has to go into hiding and be part of like witness protection with the Anti-Villain League. So we get some funny setups there where he has to have a normal life. And we have to kind of forget that he more or less had this in the first movie, and that was part of the comedy, was this weird black house where this supervillain lived on a normal street. So we just kind of forget about that, and we have some comedy of Gru trying to pretend to be a solar panel salesman. So that's the main conflict, is this bad guy who wants to become a cockroach person trying to kidnap his son. The B story is this next door neighbor girl figures out who he is immediately because supervillains in the MCU, the Minions cinematic universe, are famous. So she manipulates him into teaching her how to be a villain and kidnapping the mascot from his original school. So it kind of ties back into the whole high school thing. And of course, it's a honey badger, which is a rather fierce animal. And the C story is just the Minions story. So at this point, we not only are sticking to like an ABC style formula for arranging our plot, we also have a formula that has fallen into favor in the Minions movies themselves, which is you have an A story that's Gru, a B story that's something to do with Gru, like Gru's romance, Gru's brother, relationship with his brother. And the C story is Minions having an adventure. And in this case, the Minions are having an adventure. They get superpowers from the Anti-Villain League, and they're sent out to do things, and they do them poorly. But of course, the Minions, the 4 or 5 Minions that have these superpowers, which are basically rip-off of the Fantastic Four superpowers, of course, they're going to come back in, and one of them, Cyclops, right? They're going to come back in and solve the problem of the third act, which is that the villain manages to kidnap Gru's son. So they're going to help solve that problem with their superhero powers. Pretty standard, fair, and pretty standard for Despicable Me movies at this time. There's a small D story, which is Gru's son doesn't really like him. And this is common with fathers with new babies, where it's like, the baby wants mommy. Why doesn't the baby love me? Right? So he's got that thing going on. And of course, that problem is solved by the final act, where the baby is able to decide he loves Gru and help him defeat the villain, even though he was slightly turned into a cockroach. We have cameos from every character from past movies, including Dr. Nefario, who hand waves away the fact that Gru's baby son, Gru Jr., whoever, has been turned into a cockroach by just getting rid of it with science. We have this one of these final scenes where they're doing like a sing-off competition, kind of like dance-off, in the prison, and you get to see every villain from every single Despicable Me movie that they've had so far, thus bringing everything around and kind of acknowledging everything that's come before in case this is the last Despicable Me movie. But given that I think this movie is actually okay, and I think it did okay, we can probably expect an MCU number 7, a Minions 3, or something like that. The whole movie, the jokes are more or less what you can expect. It's a combination of situational humor, like slapstick kind of humor, either from the Minions or from Gru, kind of Steve Carell carrying funny lines. A lot of the jokes don't land, but they're happening so quick, you don't have time to really feel anything from a joke not landing. They're just moving on to a new gag. There's also reference humor. There's a part where like the girl's playing Dance Dance Revolution to Dragon Force, which makes no sense because Dragon Force became popular from Guitar Hero, but They just kind of forced that in there, and it's like a funny moment. My kids laughed, right? But for me, it was wait a minute, they're referencing the wrong thing, right? So reference humor post 2000, I don't know, it ends up in every movie. My big complaint about the movie is there's really just too much packed into the movie, so none of the conflicts really have sufficient development to kind of breathe on their own. And I kind of blame that C plot, the Minions plot, because that takes up a lot of screen time. But the audience expectation is that there's going to be this Minions plot, because we've had that in like 3 movies before this now, not include, actually more than that. There's like Minions, Minions 2, and then Despicable Me 3 and Despicable Me 2. So like 4 of the previous movies at least have a Minions kind of plot going on in the background. So it's an audience expectation. You have to have it in there. And you're kind of limited on screen time, right? You can't have a movie go, especially a Despicable Me movie, go for 2.5 hours. So you cut it down. You need to cut it down to 90. So you're going to cut a lot of the character development and plot development. The characters generally have time to have like one funny scene of their new life, and then you move on to more jokes, right? There's just a little too much going on for all of that to work. There's a lot of missed opportunities for jokes because you're trying to hammer through the plot so fast. And it's kind of unavoidable. It's unavoidable with sequels. As you add movies to a series, the expectations are different from the first movie where there was like no expectations, or even the second movie, is that people come to expect to see the things that attracted them to the first movie or two. And you really can't make a movie without those things without people being upset about it. But I think this would please children and fans of Despicable Me because it has all the things that you would expect. You have an antagonist villain, and you have a Minions plot where the Minions are being very silly and you can laugh at them. There's lots of slapstick humor. There's lots of jokes about Gru trying to fit into society and being really weird. That's been there since the first movie. So tonally, it all just kind of fits with the original movie and just works. So if you're looking for a family movie, I think it's fine. Overall, I would give it a passing grade, maybe a C. I think it's good for what it is. Maybe a C plus, because if we compare it to other movies, it's significantly better, even though it's very formulaic. It just executes things well. And one thing I do appreciate about the Despicable Me movies is you can generally count on them to not be very socially controversial at this point, meaning your kids are going to watch them and laugh, and there's not going to be a whole lot of stuff in it that wasn't already present in like movies from 1985 as far as like social topics and stuff like that. There's no rainbow stuff in the movie or anything that you need to worry about where people are very sensitive about Disney inserting stuff like that in their characters and their movies. That's not the case with Despicable Me 4, which is actually like Despicable Me 6-ish. So that's my review for the movie. Hopefully that makes sense and you get an idea of what it did, why it did it. We don't really need to talk that much about the setting and the characters. If you've seen any of the prior movies, those are all kind of there. It's mostly just about getting those plots. And I guess this is a benefit of a sequel too, by the way, so you don't have to spend a lot of time developing those characters. You can just throw Gru into a funny situation and he can be Gru and it works. You can just throw Lucy into a funny situation and she can just be Lucy and it works. She like burns some hair off of a lady trying to pretend to be a hairdresser, and it's just a funny scene. That doesn't go anywhere. There's no consequences to a lot of that stuff because we have to cut down the runtime. But they're just sort of jokes, like, the tree is the plot and you're just hanging ornaments on it, and that's all the jokes. Those are all the funny scenes. You don't have to spend time like developing who Gru is. He just is himself. His only real personal conflict is like, my son doesn't love me enough, and then his son loves him enough at the end of the movie, so it's all resolved. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below. Did you watch Despicable Me 4? Did you not watch it? Is it something that you think is awful? And how would you compare it to other, especially family movie fare that Hollywood has been doing over the last few years? I think it's actually, despite the fact that I consider it formulaic in a general sense and formulaic in like there's a specific Minions formula now, it's enjoyable, and it's more enjoyable than a lot of other movies that I've seen thus far, and that's the message that I would take away from it. So leave me your thoughts down below. Don't forget, you can join my Patreon. It'll be linked down below. You get a free book every month, and you get a free book the first month too, as well as access to all the copies of my live write. So I write a book live on the channel, and so you can read it. You can read the manuscripts from that after I have done them unedited, so you can see what it's like raw. If you don't feel like watching the live stream and you just want to read the book, that's basically free books there as well. So check that out. That's Patreon, and you get access to the Discord server as well. So check that out, and I'll see you all next time. Have a great day.